Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac with me. Welcome, Mac.
What's good?
And Gio.
What's good, guys?
So tonight we're going to be going over the action from the final day of the Premier League. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We'll love hearing from you guys. And once you guys getting involved, our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. And with that last day of the Premier League having taken place today, of course, we have to go straight into the final results. And of course, we're going to start off with the match that we were all keeping an eye on: Man City against West Ham. Man City ultimately 3-1 winners. And if you were nervous as a Man City fan, I think the first couple of minutes really settled your nerves. Fantastic strike by Phil Foden, which really, I know, Mac, you're watching this one closely. Gut punch to Arsenal fans. So I guess we'll go straight to you, Mac. How did you see this game play out?
It kind of felt like it never really got going. And what I mean by this is because Phil Foden scoring the first goal early on, be like, okay, fine, still Man City only up by 1 at that point, and then him scoring a second 16 minutes after scoring his first one, it kind of felt like the game was done at that point. I know going in towards the end of the first half, Kudus ended up scoring. At that point, we'll get to it later, Arsenal was tied. So there was hope, but it felt much more like a long shot. And then again, early on in the second half, 59th minute, felt like game done and dusted. It really, at certain points, like I said, it felt a little bit close. Maybe you raised a slight Ancelotti eyebrow, but I don't think you're ever really nervous if you're a Man City after that opening mark. And just looking at the course of the game, West Ham really created one opportunity. So even after being up 2-0, and even being up 2-1 at that point, even though it was just one opportunity away, West Ham could never really break out. Only had 27% possession, 2 shots on target. They really had nothing to offer, I would say, on the offensive end, and it was just a matter of how many City were going to score, and if they were going to score enough, and which they did. So full credit to them, and specifically on Phil Foden, I think this individual performance, this individual game against a deep block, having the ability to be able to break down a team for himself, for his teammates. I think this is probably, I would argue, his crown jewel performance in some ways, where it encapsulates everything that he could potentially do as a City player. And the scary part is he's still only 23. I think he was up for the Young Player of the Year last year, which is crazy to think about. So full credit to City. Absolutely resounding result where we may have had an exciting day, but they took it away from us way too early.
Yeah, Gio, of course, Phil Foden announced player of the season, I think just a day before, 2 days before this game occurred. Yeah. Man City now winning 4 titles back to back. What else can we really say about this machine? Of course, as well, Phil Foden and Rodri, very fitting goal scorers for City to encapsulate that. Those two probably were the best players this season, but you still have Kevin De Bruyne, you have Erling Haaland, and of course a host of other players. So how good were City, not just in this game, but throughout the season?
Yeah, that's what we call a luxury, which not a lot of teams have. No, I think, again, we kind of go through the same motions of the season every year. We kind of say, oh, who's going to come and kind of challenge City for the title? City starts off decent, takes a dip, and once they take a dip, they kind of lock in, and that's exactly what they did. They locked in when it really mattered, kind of gave other teams a glimmer of hope. I think, obviously, things went their way because Liverpool kind of lost their way, kind of lost their heads late into the season as well. One big loss kind of changed the flow of everything, and it was kind of it from there. So that only leaves Arsenal, and we can't discredit Arsenal. They had a historic season. At the end of the day, they had more wins than they had more points than they did have in their Invincibles year. So to that, again, can't really do much about that. I think they won 16 of the last 18 games, and you still couldn't win the title. That just goes to show how dominant the City side was, and beyond prepared you have to be, and the kind of depth they had to have in order to compete with this City side. Simply because even without KDB, who took the reins? Rodri, and when Rodri was kind of injured or serving a suspension, who was there? Phil Foden took the reins as if as if they never skipped a beat. Yes, we saw the kind of dip in the midfield they took because Ilkay Gundogan was such a workhorse for them, but they obviously regrouped and reconvened and decided that we can do this without Ilkay, and we're going to figure out how, and obviously they did.
Yeah, and it's just a bunch of players stepping up at the right times for City. And like you said, Gio, it's a luxury to have. There's questions about who might be replacing Bernardo Silva, who it looks like he's on his way out. I guess I want to touch on quickly the Kudus goal because it was a great strike for him just before half. Scoring that goal would have put things into perspective for City. I think in the highlights they showed Pep becoming very, very annoyed and anxious after that goal went in right before halftime. So though City did well enough to sort of continue control in the second half, and of course, eventually getting a third through Rodri. But I just want to point that out that Kudus could be a player that City might look into to replace the likes of Bernardo Silva. Not that they necessarily need to. I know that they have enough quality in that squad, but I guess overall, though, Mac, Pep now wins his sixth title in the Premier League, first team to win 4 straight. Are there? I know that there's a lot of, especially on social media, a lot of people talking about, Arsenal couldn't do it. Liverpool really fell off. Are we not giving enough praise to the City team and how impactful Pep has been since he's joined the Premier League?
Absolutely, I think that. I think it may be because, and this is there's two sides to this argument where I think people either give Pep too much flowers or discredit a lot of his achievements, and I think it's a lot of your perception of maybe his time with Barcelona or Bayern Munich, which is impacting his success with Manchester City, which maybe people may have the viewpoint where he's given such I would say a larger cachet or a little larger pot of gold to be able to deal with, to be able to manage, to be able to bring the success. But I think we're talking about. And I think winning 4 in a row puts him in the conversation for the greatest manager of all time in the Premier League. Looking at that 6 of 8, I think that if you kind of just map out his career, if he spent this whole time in the Premier League, if you just kind of overarch it in terms of how many Sir Alex Ferguson won, I think he managed for, I think it was 28 years, I think, in the Premier League, Gio. Correct me if I'm wrong. Won 13 titles. So just based off those odds, if you map out the same type of career, if we kind of just go year in, year out, Pep would end up having more titles, I think, historically. Obviously, that's not the game that we play. I think the big separator was, in terms of when I was looking at this, is the winning percentage. And I think this is key when you're looking at kind of compare and contrast, where, and it's very different because we're talking about people that like, Arsenal didn't do this, Liverpool didn't do this in previous years, and this year, this really feels like, and this is a comparison I used earlier with Ray, and I think this is very apt, is where you're the second best boxer in an era, and you would have been one of the greatest of all time in a boxing era if you were up against Mike Tyson's. Like, you're Evander Holyfield. You it just sucks to suck. You're born in the wrong generation. You could have been one of the greatest of all times, but there's someone who was just one of the probably the best right above you, putting you down every single opportunity you can get, right? And kind of felt like that. Whereas now, in terms of that winning percentage, and to keep at those levels, Sir Alex Ferguson across almost, I think it's 1,500 games for Manchester United in the Premier League, had just an under 60% winning percentage. Pep's at 72.82. So it's just game in, game out, win, especially at the crunch time, business end of the season, they do what they do. So I think he deserves a lot of plaudits, a lot of credit. The only other, I guess, because talking point I think comes out of this is where, for me, I'm curious to see what both of you think, is where Phil Foden, I think he's 23 now, 24 or something like that. Is he already the second best Premier League midfielder for Manchester City? Again, I was looking at it. If you look game over game, the PFA Player of the Year, I think that's a big kind of nugget in his locker that he's able to kind of go into this argument with. But I think you may be talking about like the Bernardo Silvas, the David Silvas, the Rodris, and I think the apt comparison, if you ask most Man City fans, probably would have been David Silva. Phil Foden has, I think, 4 fewer goals in the Premier League and played half the amount of games, 150 to 300. So he'll easily surpass that. What are your guys' thoughts there? Is that conversation too early for him? Do you think maybe he could eventually beat Kevin De Bruyne as maybe their greatest midfielder? Maybe I'm discrediting Yaya Toure for that one season. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think it definitely can make a case for himself. The way he's played this season for sure will bring him up to rubbing shoulders with those players that you just talked about. But I think it's just the longevity that we'll have to see. Can he build upon this next season? Can he continuously be an ever present now name on that first 11 that we didn't really see in his first couple of years? Whereas, of course, you saw Toure, and of course the player that you didn't mention, Gundogan, who just they relied on very, very heavily. Can Foden be now? I think because he's kind of taking the reins over Kevin De Bruyne. Can he be the new partner to Holland in that sort of offense for City? That will, I think, make or break that discussion. And I think definitely he has what it takes to overtake Kevin De Bruyne if he does continue playing the way he has. It just we'll have to see what happens if they do stay together, and even if Pep is there in a couple of years. But what did you think, Gio, about that question?
If I'm going to be completely honest, I think you can have that conversation simply because Kevin De Bruyne had to leave the Premier League to get and hone his skills to become the midfielder that he is today. Phil Foden is jumping straight into the Prem, a very physical Prem at that, and just owning the show from a very young age. So I think you obviously didn't get that from KDB, as he obviously was at Chelsea, got sold to Chelsea. Obviously, the system has to work for the player as well. But I think Foden is very fortunate to have a manager like Pep that believes in him and gave him the opportunities at a very young age to do so. But I think he will exceed KDB. Not quite yet. He hasn't done it yet. I think if he goes on to win maybe a couple more Prems, I think, yeah, then he can easily jump KDB to be one of the best, midfielders for City alone. But not only City, but the Prem as well.
Yeah,
Should the talk be for him to jump to a different league instead of Holland as a differentiator, or do you think he's more kind of just a Gerrard, a Lampard, that type of being at one club? It is his boyhood club, growing up playing there the entire time. So I think that's interesting because I think that maybe is he the guy that Real Madrid look and be like, hey, maybe we get this type of player instead, or something like that, or maybe he goes to a Barcelona, or maybe he goes somewhere else to maybe solidify himself in a different country. Again, I preferably hope that that's not the case, but I just think it'll be an interesting conversation because he's still so young.
that's a great shout. He can definitely apply his trade anywhere else. I think he's just technically so gifted. I compare him. I know a lot of people. A lot of people might disagree with a player like Musiala, who is so technically gifted, but now he's taken that step forward to actually get into goal involvements, which ultimately can translate into any league. And honestly, the only other way for him to showcase that skill is to do it in an international stage, not even necessarily leaving England, but doing it for England in an international tournament. So we'll see what happens. Of course, City have another game to play still coming up next week. Gio, so we'll definitely cover that in detail in the next podcast. But let's move on to, of course, the team that pushed City up to the very end, Gio. That's, of course, Arsenal, who were against Everton winners at the end of the day, but it didn't start off the way I think Arsenal fans would have wanted. Actually got the win very late, so they did their part ultimately, but just fell short. And it kind of encapsulates how the season's gone. Near perfect Arsenal, where they only concede from a deflection from a free kick.
Right.
They get the goal back in a couple minutes to tie it up, are always on the offensive and trying to get a goal against a Everton team who we know how they're going to play all day long. But of course, they were able to get that goal and just fell short. What did you think of this game and the result, Gio?
Look, I think I hate to be that guy, but I think that deflected goal was kind of set the mood for the day. Them being so dominant throughout the season, being able to almost score at will, as we can kind of say at this point. They scored early and often, if not late and often. They scored at will. But obviously, yeah, that set the tone for the day, and they kind of almost knew that it was going to be a long day, and it was always going to be an uphill battle. Sorry. And I think that was the case, once City got that win last week, they knew that they were going to have to everything had to go their way. Every last detail had to go their way. And right off the bat, that deflection in the 40th minute, it was it took the breath right out of the fan's stomach and even the player's stomach, whether they wanted to admit it or not. So again, we credit Man City, but we also have to credit Arsenal for a successful season. Obviously, the title would have been the cap to the most successful season, but I think they did the best they could. Again, the resources just weren't there. But I think now they have the blueprint, really, and they just need to add pieces and puzzles here and there. Maybe a striker, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, well, we can definitely talk about that, and we can have a whole podcast about that. But I guess just want to get Mac's opinion because, like you said, Gio, I very much agree. The floor level that Arsenal have had this season has been significantly raised with the players that they brought in. They're essentially almost perfect, where they're very much hard to beat. Will create an abundance of chances on the offensive end. But it just feels like at some times when the offense doesn't click, and also when there are injuries, they need that sort of extra player or extra quality to push them over the edge, and even just distribute the load from Saka, who of course Mac was missing from this game, and of course we have to talk about it, and or just even mention it. I think Gabriel Jesus had fewer than 5 goals this season. The main sort of striker going into the season, if you could argue, didn't register more than 5 goals for Arsenal in the Premier League, so not great there. But what did you think about, I guess, Mac, how this season went for Arsenal, and could it have been? I mean, if they won it, it would have been fantastic. But where, I guess, was it lost, and how do you reflect on the season?
I think if you're looking at it, you can look at it two different directions, of course. When you look at the differentiation between City and Arsenal, the same amount of wins, goal difference identical, difference of only 2 points. Really, that's Arsenal losing 2 extra games and Man City picking up a couple extra ties. At certain points in the season, it kind of felt like Arsenal were maybe out of it towards the end of December when they lost back-to-back games against in London derbies to Fulham and West Ham. That felt like they weren't coming back. Then they went on their winning streak at the beginning of this year. Since in 2024, they've only lost 1 game in the Premier League, and that was the Aston Villa game. You could pinpoint that in terms of situational moments. But I think as a whole, I think it's a very successful season. This is their second highest ever points total. I think 90 is the highest one, and that was back in 03-04. So you're talking about more than 2 decades in terms of having a performance like this throughout the course of a season. So I think it's safe to say that Arsenal are back. The question, though, is that in terms of how long does this window last? Because a lot of things did go very well much their way this year. Jesus, yes, didn't have a great season, I think, and as well as Martinelli. I would say aside from those 2 players, maybe you argue injury luck with Jurgen Timber, but William Saliba literally played every minute of the season for Arsenal. Is that going to happen every year? Probably not. And the drop off to him to the next person could be quite large. And in the bad moments of the season, maybe you drop a couple extra points. So I think a lot of things went in their favor for them to be able to get this far. The interesting part with me is then the offseason, how aggressive they are to be able to either close the gap with City and see if they can leapfrog them if City take a step back with players like Bernardo Silva leaving, and their reinforcements that they bring in are more of the, let's say, Mateus Nunez versus the Jeremy Dokus, right? That maybe they sign a couple poorer ones and it doesn't work in their favor, and Arsenal are able to leapfrog them. Because I think, and it's going to be interesting, we talk about windows of opportunities to be able to kind of grab hold of a championship. I always look back at the OKC Thunder in terms of basketball with Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden. They thought, oh, we're going to have these guys for a decade. We're going to eventually win. We don't need to go all in at any point. Of course, things happen and they don't go in your way. And similarly with Liverpool, if you look at, and we'll talk about this later on, where under Klopp's era, this is probably the most successful era that they've had in the Premier League. But they picked up 1 title. What could have they've done to be more aggressive, to be a little bit more out there where they could have achieved more? Not to say they didn't achieve a lot, because they did.
Right.
But against the City team, it's so hard. So I think that'll be interesting. And then the last piece of that is where, how long does Pep even stay in the Premier League at this point? Because let's say if he's gone at the end of next season, based off the age profile of a lot of these Arsenal players, I think it's if you run through the lineup of Ben White, William Saliba, Gabriel, Tomiyasu, Jurgen Timber, Declan Rice, Odegaard, Saka, even Havertz and Martinelli, they're all below the age of 26. So if Pep's gone in 2 years, then they're at the prime age of football. So again, but who knows what will happen. So that's the tough part, is where how much do you go all in for this next season, because that window may close and the gaps between these other teams may start to swing the other way, and Arsenal don't have disadvantage on everyone else in comparison to maybe not as much of a gap between them and City, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's for sure the Premier League is going to be the main focus for Arsenal, but even being competitive in cup competitions, I think that's something that Klopp is very much credited. Maybe a backhanded compliment, saying he didn't do as much for the league because he only won one, but he did win a couple of other cups and made it far in various competitions. Arsenal will definitely need that strengthening, I think, in the offseason to be competitive in, of course, the Champions League, where they're expected to be ever present now with sort of the squad that they have now. They're definitely going to finish in the top four for the foreseeable future, at least the next couple of years. And so they're going to want to be as competitive in that to maybe even win it, because you can only do so much in the Premier League if Pep is the manager for Man City, but a cup competition like the Champions League and also Arteta's I think FA Cup win a couple of years ago, that could be another sort of way of success, and even a way to strengthen that team morale, because I know that we've had very few sightings of Vieira, Emil Smith Rowe, among other players that you would have expected to play a lot more. It looks like Arteta's been running through a couple of those players, riding them a lot more in terms of the minutes that they play. So I'm interested to see what happens on the offseason. But I guess we'll take a quick break here, boys, and then we'll be back covering some more action from the last day of the Premier League. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We're just going to continue our podcast now, discussing some more action that took place today. Of course, the last day of the season meant for Liverpool fans, myself, a very sad day. Klopp's last match in charge of this Liverpool side, and we already talked about it earlier when Mac mentioned this is probably the most successful period Liverpool have had in the Premier League, and it definitely feels like it's coming to a close. Ultimately got the 2-0 win over Wolves, very much helped through that red card that Semedo picked up in the middle of the first half. Ultimately, then that meant, of course, Liverpool were going to have a lot of chances, a lot of possession. We're able to get goals from McAllister and Kwanzaa before the end of the first half, and then just basically able to rotate the squad and get a couple new faces in and seeing how things go. But I think ultimately got the win, and I think that's the way to pay homage to Jurgen Klopp and how important he's been. Of course, I guess I just have to point out that I think Guardiola was he was interviewed after winning the Premier League, and he had some kind words to say, almost broke down emotionally, talking about Klopp, how he's going to miss him and that he pushed him all the way. Very much like how exactly the Aguero, you can never replace him. And of course, among other examples, that Guardiola becomes very emotional. But I think that in itself goes to show how fierce that rivalry was. Ultimately, though, Mac, what were your reactions to this game and overall, I guess, to Klopp's time at Liverpool?
This game, it felt like the red card for Semedo kind of made it fast out, made it easy for Liverpool to be. Kind of felt like it was a celebration in a lot of ways, especially after the red card, where it didn't feel like a competitive game, where they kind of, not to say it was like a testimonial at some points, but it kind of felt like that. Like Salah kind of scuffing at half chances, having a little bit of fun, smart. Van Dijk, I think he blocked one shot, but his reaction was like, yeah, it's fine, whatever, not a big deal, it doesn't matter. It kind of felt like that, but at the same time, once they got that 2-0 lead, it was comfortable, it was relaxed. I think Wolves, at the same time, were a good opponent to play because they knew the occasion in some ways. They're not really playing for anything either. No serious stress there. No one trying to get hurt. As one Sunday League team that we played against last year, they got work tomorrow. Like that seemed like that was their whole focus, which I respect and understand. Though in regards to what it was able to do for Liverpool, their fan base, Anfield, being able to have that moment to kind of wrap their arms around Klopp, I thought was very important. After kind of maybe some people may argue the ups and downs in the more recent weeks, it seems like they were able to at least end off on a high, which is great. And now I think everyone will have an opportunity to reflect before Arne Slot comes in to be able to take over management for next year. I think if you would ask me though, and I think this is important, is like when we go to Gio, maybe share your thoughts. Is there a particular favorite moment from Klopp? For me, I think it's pretty easy. It's the 4-0 comeback win against Barcelona to then push Liverpool on to win the Champions League, particularly the Trent to Origi, I think it is, the assist from the quick corner. I think that probably highlights it as an individual moment. And then the only thing, I guess, before we're talking about the only other thing on this from Klopp, other than like his personality, his jovialness, definitely a great guy, good leader. A credit to the sport and the Premier League. But the most underrated part, which I'll miss, is that I think he's the most intelligent complainer I've seen in terms of like, the pitch is too wet. No, the pitch is too dry. It's too windy. There's not enough wind. Like he any argument that he wants, he can make, and I'll believe him. And it seems like he's the type of manager you run through a wall for, similar into Mourinho, right? And that type of way. So I very much, I know I say that kind of the tongue in cheek, but sad to see him go, but happy he's able to go out on a high.
Yeah, Gio, I guess just before I toss it to you, I did want to say that I'm happy in a sense that Liverpool were no longer challenging for the title on this game, because I think the occasion and all the emotions that were coming out, I don't think Liverpool, sad to say as a Liverpool fan, I don't think Liverpool would have been able to get the win with sort of knowing Klopp this was his last game at Anfield in that occasion. So I guess good thing overall that Liverpool weren't challenging for the title, because that eased the pressure. Like Mac was saying, they were just playing to go through the motions, get the win, yes, and make it a good feel environment. But ultimately, it's just I guess the way it ended is enough and fitting for Klopp that he was able to get a good reception. I think the fans started singing closer to the end of the match and really showing their respect to the manager. But yeah, but Gio, what were your thoughts overall, I guess, for this game and also Klopp's time at Liverpool?
The game, I thought, the perfect send-off. Obviously, no red card or not, as long as Liverpool got the win some way, somehow, it was going to be the perfect send-off, regardless of the fact. But in terms of his stay at Liverpool, it's like don't get me wrong, I'm a pretty new gen football fan, so all these old rivalries, they're still there, but I just think the way he's able to just rile up the crowd, you score a big goal and he'll literally run to the other end and he'll do his little fist pump thing and his fist pump celebration, post game when they win a big match. I think it's a little bit, it's fun, but it's also shithousery, because what business do you have as a manager shouting to the crowd and doing the 3 fist pumps after a big win? As a manager these days, or of the past, kind of shake your hand, go under the tunnel, let the boys be boys. But he's not that type of manager. He will let the crowd know and he will engage with the fans, which I love. But honestly, I think unfortunately his career at Liverpool will be overshadowed by his rivalry with Pep. Again, Mac touched on it earlier. Just the overall success. Yes, they were consistently in the top 3 of the Premier League, but was only able to get one Prem through his whole stay, and he also got a Champions League title out of that. Again, which are great accomplishments for a lot of these guys. But again, when you think of longevity, when you think of the best winners of the league, best managers of the league, you're gonna want to go down to the numbers and the amount they've won and the titles. So unfortunately, it was overshadowed by Pep, but I think nonetheless, he really turned that Liverpool side. He really turned Anfield around 180 and put that winning mentality that was once there back into the club. So hats off to him for that.
Yeah, I just gotta piggyback off that what Gio was talking about in terms of the celebrations that Klopp has. Of course, over the top from what we expect a manager to be. But one of my fondest memories of Klopp is definitely, you guys, this might be a little bit too far for you guys to remember, but definitely if you're a diehard Liverpool fan, you remember that 2-1 win. Sorry, sorry, 5-4 comeback win against Norwich, where Jurgen Klopp at that point still wearing glasses. Crazy comeback to win it away, and he breaks glasses in these celebrations. Doesn't need to get involved at all, but that's just the type of character he is. And of course, one that you guys might remember is the, I think, comeback win against Spurs last season. Either last season or the season before, where he pulls his hamstring celebrating that last minute winner, I think, by Diogo Jota. So definitely some fond memories there. We'll see, of course, what happens next, because for Liverpool, I'm not exactly sure. Of course, you guys might have seen that Arne Slot is going to be, or has been announced even by Klopp to the Liverpool fans at the end of the Wolves match. Not exactly sure what to expect there, but definitely can expect a shift and rebuild around likely a more possession and sort of quick build-up phase type of team. And whether that means we see some of those ever-present players, we'll just have to wait and see what Arne Slot comes in to do. So we'll see what happens there. Let's now move on to, I guess, a game or team that we want to choose to talk about briefly and cook on for the remaining part of this podcast for the season. And Gio, I'm going to toss it to you first if you have one. Any specific result or game that you want to talk about that finished today, or even has a running theme towards the end of the season?
No running theme. Well, actually, a little bit of a running theme. Crystal Palace cooked today. You would think, I guess they were partying a little. I guess Villa was partying a little too hard after securing, a Champions League spot. I get it. Again, like I had mentioned in the doc last week on Monday's podcast that they didn't really have anything to play for. Their position was kind of set in stone. So you know what? Go out there, have fun, let the boys play. But to get shellacked 5-0, I think they need to do a little bit better than that. Yes, you won. Yes, you secured a Champions League spot, but I think you need to, be a little bit more professional than that. Fans paid good money to see you play, and that outing wasn't it. But to Crystal Palace's point, they have been quite good in the latter half of the season, especially the last, I would say, 4 weeks, apart from the Man City game I think they played. But apart from that, I think they've been playing very well. Win or loss, I think the compete level is there. I think they have a good framework of what they want to do with the team. But again, when your star players are doing well, big clubs are going to come knocking. So who knows how long that will last, where Michael Elise goes, where Mark Gahey goes. There could be a lot of movement.
Yeah, I'll have to talk about that point as well, because that was one of the things I was watching. Mateta getting a hat trick first in the Premier League for Palace at Selhurst Park. Big shout out to him. But of course, every time a couple of the goals went in, he was celebrating and showing his love for Eze, who was fantastic, probably the player that finished the most in form this season in the Premier League. It's going to be crazy. It's great to see that they finished the season that well. It's going to be crazy to see what happens for them if that front three is able to stay together going into next season, because if I'm any rival fan, I'm going to be anxious to be playing these guys, because the way they finished, it was so good overall. I did want to say as well, Villa did have a lot of injuries, and it might be a concern. Maybe I'm looking at it too much too much, because it is the last game of the season. But the fact that they were able to lose 5-0, a team that is managed by Emery and you expect to be very solid defensively, it's not the first time that they've lost by more than 3 goals in this Premier League season. So that's something that he's going to have to address definitely in the offseason, because of course they have Champions League next season, and that's going to be a big jump in quality, and that squad is going to be needing for rebuild as well. So something to look out for. Anything on this match, Mac, or another team or story that you want to cover?
So I was going to talk about Crystal Palace, to be completely honest with you, because if you look at their last 6 games on the form table, they would have finished, they were the 3rd best team. Last 10 games of the 4th best team. So we're talking about this last chunk of the season, really the last 4th of the season, they were a top 4 team. And I think that's the return of Olise, Eze, Mateta getting into form, playing with them, the manager coming in with Glasner. I think we're talking about a team that I think has one of the most interesting off seasons because they invest in their team. They spend a lot of money to potentially see if they can get a European position next year and potentially hold on to the young superstars. I think it's a little bit different than West Ham, where if you look how they finished the season, you could understand if Pakata or Kudus might potentially look at greener pastures on the other side. Whereas Palace, you might understand why they would want to stay and potentially see what they could be able to build at next year and then review at the end of next season and still potentially get a quite hefty sum for the SAs, Olises, Marquehis of the world, right? So that's in regards to them. If we're going to go to negative, couple quick fire negatives. One, a big loser for Sheffield United, having conceded 104 goals in the Premier League, all-time record. So I don't know if that's a record you want. Probably not. Also, downside to Championship, your ass. We've rejected all three teams and we'll give them right back to you. So Luton, Burnley, Sheffield United, so long. It was nice knowing you. You're here for not a long time and not really a good time either because you're going back down. And then I think the last negative, in some ways a positive, and I'm sorry to do this to you, Gio. Manchester United won, but they lost because now they're not in European competitions. The only way they make European competitions is if they win the FA Cup final, which, let's be honest, we've already talked about mid-pod. We're not going to preview because let's see who will win. So why do so much time wasted on that? But if they don't get European spots, Ten Hag's probably out. Just to see how that goes. And then going off away from the negatives now back to the last positives. Interesting. The last 6 games and the last 10 games form table, team that was flip-flopping between 3rd and 4th place with Crystal Palace was, of course, Chelsea. And I think they're the other team that is going to have a very interesting summer. They are they are going to be in a European competition next year. The question being if it's I think it's going to be a conference league based off of I think all the ends up situations, which is that I think that's an interesting situation from the being because now it's an excuse necessarily to have a heavier squad where maybe you have quite a few more players built into your team. But I think they're a team that realistically they should have been looking to offload players. So it's a little bit easier for Pochettino. And it seems like based off how well they finished this last quarter of the season, he's definitely going to be back next year. And it'll be interesting to see what they do. Because I think that if you look at their starting 11, who necessarily you feel 100% confident going to be next year, nailed down, have position, no questions asked, you're not looking at too many. So I'll be very interested to see where and how they reinforce. Because they're one of the teams, I would argue, that have, again, 3 or 4 supremely high quality players in like a Cole Palmer and Kuku Viking and Redding. Caicedo's a good player, Gallagher's a good player, but outside of them, and this is something that we'll talk probably some point through the offseason, they have a lot of loanees coming back. Kepa and Lukaku are coming back as well. So what do they do with them? So they're one of the teams that have a lot of questions, but at least how they ended the season, they might go into the offseason with a little bit of an uptick or a little bit more of a positive outlook.
Yeah, just a quick word on that Chelsea result. It definitely felt like a last game of the season type of. Do you guys remember when we were in elementary school and you get that last day of school where everyone just does whatever they want? Caicedo, of course, getting his first goal of the season, scoring basically from the halfway line. Very much a last day of school type of behavior where goalie's no longer there. He's like, you know what? The type of season I've had, maybe I'll try something like this. Of course, it comes off for him, and that's a great thing for him. Sterling looking decently well as well to get that goal, the Chelsea second goal. But the way they conceded against Bournemouth as well, I think it was the deflection. It just shows, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, very close to one of the goals that they scored in terms of timing. Just shows how flip-floppy their season has been. But of course, they finished quite well, in this part of the season towards the end. So big shout outs to them. I did want to focus in, though, on one game because, Man U, we have to talk about them. Gio's here. And we also have to we have to preview a little bit, at least, how the FA Cup final will go. I mean, the first, I guess I want to talk about Brighton. De Zerbi has been announced that he'll be leaving Brighton, so I'm interested to see. Of course, we expect them to have a good season this year with some more addition to the squad and also European football. But I think we can all argue maybe it was kind of a disappointment. What do you
Yeah.
think, Gio?
Yes, and I want to make a early shout for where De Zerbi will go. And it's gonna be, hey, early shout, and it's gonna be
And
Juventus.
United. Sorry.
No,
Oh,
Juventus. I like that. That's fine.
he's gonna go to Juventus. I think he fits that culture. I think he gets Champions League football. He gets a whole new league to experience. I think if Juventus were smart, they would go after him. Young manager. I don't think they have anything to lose in that sense. If things go great, they go great, extremely well. If they don't go well, hey, we tried. He's proven himself at Brighton. Given the type of play they do there, I think he can quite very well replicate it at Juventus. Granted, some extra summer signings, but I think Juventus could be a great shout for a man like De Zerbi.
yeah. Well, the only thing I'm thinking of is it's going to be a big shift in sort of how they're playing because De Zerbi, we all know, likes to play very expansive football, and I think Allegri the whole season hasn't been playing such expansive football. I think that's something that Juventus fans have gone on his back for. But we'll be interested to see what kind of change occurs there if that does occur. What I'm interested in knowing is what's Graham Potter doing? Could he be interested in coming back to Brighton now and taking over? Because I'm excited to see if they're going to stick with this young core that Brighton have because they do have a good number of young players that are coming through. They're going to likely leave, likely lose Adam Lallana and other older players this season. But I think we can all agree Brighton do have some pieces there to at least build on, or if not, sell and reinforce their existing squad. Now, quickly to touch on Man U, Gio, they've started another game where they play like a 4-2-2-2, which I'm not exactly sure how that works, but it's a great sign that Losandro Martinez came back. You have as well Varane came back as well to help in defense. Casemiro moved up into midfield afterwards, I believe. Diallo starting more recently, and of course Hodgson coming back and scoring in this game as well. How would you rate Gio? How Hodgland's season's gone? And just to put context, we've been harping on how bad Nicholas Jackson has been this season. He scored 14 goals and had 5 assists in the Premier League.
Right.
Hodgland had 10 goals and 2 assists in the Premier League, but also added 5 in the Champions League. So kind of a hit or miss season. Of course, his very first season, and he came into this very dysfunctional Man U side. But I guess quick word on how you think his season went, how you rate him, and of course how you think Man U finished this season.
Let's start off with the Nicholas Jackson comparison. I think that was utterly disrespectful. So before let me address that first. First and foremost, that was disrespectful. Second of all, Hodgson has had a lot of injuries this season. So I think we don't take that into account as much as we do as fans. We expect them to come back and be perfectly healthy and perfectly ready to go. With reoccurring injuries, that may not be the case. With lingering injuries, like Rooney said, I'm sure everybody has heard it already. A lot of players play through injuries, and that's the name of the game. You have to play through injuries, and because if you don't, your opportunity can slip. Which is unfair, but hey, it's a dog eat dog world. The next person, the next man up mentality is there for a lot of these clubs and a lot of these footballers because they want to succeed. So I think those are two things. And, with a Nicholas Jackson, I think, when the attention is all on Cole Palmer, you're free a lot of the time. When the opposition knows that Man United's midfield can't provide that pass for Hodgson, they don't really have to do much. They all they got to do is intercept. All they got to do is sit a little deeper, intercept that in the air. Done. Hodgson doesn't even get a fair chance at it. The opportunity that he does get, he's played very unselfishly at that. Yes, he's taken his opportunity, and we know what he can do with the ball. I think, the ceiling is still very high, but I don't think this season was a fair, a fair visual of what Hodgson really is as a striker, as your out-and-out striker. I think he can do a lot more. I think he will do a lot more, given Man U go out there and sign some players that can provide him that service. And he comes and has a good summer tour, is fit, is healthy, and comes in the season ready to go. Granted all those things, I think he will do just fine. I think it's too early to say.
No, I want to jump on that quickly. In terms of the point about Nicholas Jackson, do you guys remember the player Michu from Swansea City? Quite a few years
Yes.
ago? He scored 18 goals, and then the next year he was replaced by Wilfred Bronny, and he scored 2. So there are one-off seasons of bummy-ass players scoring a lot of goals. It can happen. It can happen. Not to say Nicholas Jackson is a bummy-ass player. That might be disrespectful to bummy-ass players, to be honest. But I think it's you're comparing apples to like something that doesn't taste good but still a fruit. I don't even know a good comparison. I got nothing there. I think if we're gonna go positive for Manchester United, at least the young players seem to work. Aside from that, nothing else. Like you got Bruno Fernandes and a couple of young players, and you have something to build off of. We'll see what happens after that. And that's pretty much it. Like you're happy with Kopamanu. You figured out Anthony's trash. Diallo can play much better than Anthony already, and he was free. So why'd you buy Anthony? Either here or there. Garnacho and Oiland. Yeah, you have something cooking there. Give it some time. Fix all the other problems in and around that team because there's enough of them. And who knows? Just like Michu was replaced for Swansea City by Wilfred Bronny, Nicholas Jackson is going to be replaced by Nkunku next year, or maybe Lukaku next year. Who knows? Hopefully that's the last we talk about that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys were able to talk me through that because I'm just looking at numbers and that's something that stood out to me. But of course, like we said, it's a very up and down season for Man U that could finish again with a successful end if they get the FA Cup and get European football. So still a lot to play for. But guys, this concludes our podcast for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social media. That's at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well. houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be Thursday. We'll be doing a Premier League draft similar to last season. And of course, we're going to be choosing and hopefully sabotaging each other on our picks. But you have to stay tuned for that. But thank you for joining me, Mac.
Peace out.
Thank you, Gio.
Bernadeschi, take that out of your head.
See you guys soon.